Hey, everybody. So if you're here, you've seen the title of the episode, and I think you have an idea of what we're going to be talking about today. But I thought it was worth it just to give a quick sort of content warning that we are going to, talk about miscarriage and our experience with a pregnancy loss. And so if you have been through this experience, or if, you've struggled with infertility, or if you're currently pregnant, some of the subject matter might be sensitive for you on this episode. So we just want to give that forewarning. But thank you for being here. Thank you for listening.
Happy anniversary.
Oh, really? Like the actual day?
COVID.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the podcast.
No.
Not quite there yet, right?
No, that's next week.
Yeah. Well, which COVID anniversary are you referring to?
When our world shut down.
Our last day of work in person and daycare.
Yeah.
Yep. I think the official anniversary of it being named a pandemic was a few days ago.
This time last year, we were scrambling for hand sanitizer. Like, absolutely trying to find it somewhere.
And toilet paper.
Not yet.
That was a little
later. I don't
later.
think toilet paper happened.
I remember being like...
Hand sanitizer was a thing at first.
I just remember being totally in denial that it was going to be a thing. And
you're just paranoid.
Yeah, I thought you were being paranoid, like you were preparing for the zombie apocalypse, like saying we need to go stock up on things. And I was like, whatever, like we have enough stuff to get us by for a couple of weeks if we have to kind of hunker down. And because at that point, that's what it was. It was like a 2-week stay-at-home order. And you were like, no, this is going to be bigger than that. Here we are, a year later.
We were buying food 2 weeks
at a time.
Every time we bought food, it was for 2 weeks.
Right.
At
Way
least
more
for the
frozen
first
stuff. And yeah. Yep.
Anyways, welcome to While She's Napping. I am Adam.
And I'm Cindy.
And we're pregnant.
Well, that's how you're doing it. Okay. I wasn't sure what your plan was for that.
We are having another child.
Yep.
I wanted to kind of get...
I was saying while they're napping.
Yeah, I was going to say we kind of wanted to jump right in. Listeners of the show, because this is released 12 a.m. Monday, 12 a.m. Eastern time, Monday.
Right.
So that will be the 15th.
Yes.
Listeners of the show that reside, maybe some other part of the country or elsewhere around the world will know that we're having another child before some of our friends.
Right.
So consider yourselves lucky.
Yeah.
Or privileged or part of the family. I don't know. But yeah, we're having another child. I don't know if we're going to have to change the name of the show. I do not know the sex. We do not know the sex of the baby quite yet. And if it's a girl, we may just keep it while she's napping.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, in reality, I'm keeping my expectations low about them napping at the same time.
It's not going to happen. No.
Right. So
we may have to take a little bit of a hiatus.
Yeah. Or try to record some extra episodes over the summer or something before the baby gets here.
Record 4 or 5 episodes at a time.
Right. And just have them kind of in the queue.
Yeah.
But if we go on a hiatus in the fall, you'll all know why.
Yeah. So that's news. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, of course we're excited.
And I think that, sort of obviously coincides with today's episode, but we just wanted to get that news out before we get into any of the nitty gritty. But before we do get into the nitty gritty, as I just mentioned, you guys that are listening are practically family now because we're having a child. So, that being said, if you are new to the show, welcome to the family. And we appreciate you listening. We appreciate you downloading and taking an interest to the show, especially this week. This week, Cindy will be taking the ball primarily on the direction of the subject matter. And, obviously that's to be expected because, it's obvious. Anyways, that being said, we'd like to thank you for joining us. If you are listening to us on any of your favorite podcatchers, whether that be Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, we encourage you to subscribe. We appreciate it if you do. And if you are listening to us on Apple Podcasts, please give us 5 stars and a quick review. We appreciate it. Last week, we had an episode on whether or not we're living in a simulation. Only myself and a friend of mine, according to the recent poll that we put out, think we may be. Not that we are.
No, that wasn't the question. It said, are we? Not.
Oh,
might we be?
Whatever.
But yeah, I love how you participated in the poll just to so it didn't look like it.
I had to sway the vote.
Yeah.
We had some good feedback, specifically a comment that was left on the YouTube page. We thank you for the props. We like to go back and forth as well.
Yeah.
And we appreciate it, and hopefully you continue to listen. That being said, if you want to get in touch with us, interact with us on any of the social media platforms, you can.
We're on Facebook at facebook.com/whileshe'snapping. We're pretty much primarily on Instagram now, at While She's Napping, and kind of sort of a little bit, but not really on Twitter at She's Napping Pod.
I've been repping up the Twitter content, but basically just posting the episode.
Right.
That's it.
I'm terrible at Twitter. I never use it. And I'm historically pretty terrible at Instagram too, but I'm trying to be better this year.
Yeah.
So.
That was your resolution.
It was one of them. Yeah. Yep.
We'll see.
We're getting there.
So, hey, we were just talking about COVID being the anniversary of it, at least for us. Obviously, elsewhere around the world, that is, pretty subjective. Anything that I've learned, and we'll do maybe a recap of this some other time, but resiliency and how you adjust to situations. I think COVID really forced people to do that or not do it. That was up to you. I think that if you were part of the group that did make the adjustments and did live a little differently and not act like we weren't in a pandemic, I think you were doing the right thing. But the whole point of bringing this up is adjustments are a thing, whether or not you want to anticipate them or whether or not you are planning for them. There are moments in your life that you have to adjust. And I think with COVID and the situation we're going to talk about today, those are two very, very, not only monumental, but life-changing events.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been a year.
Of COVID, right.
No, I just mean for us,
right.
Like going through this in the time of COVID, added an extra layer of, isolation and complication going through something sort of traumatic that a lot of people go through. But yeah, having a miscarriage without really being able to lean on your family and friends and kind of, cry on people's shoulders and people
the way you're used to.
Right. Like have people even just be able to hug you.
Right.
And comfort you in a time like that. And that goes for not just miscarriage, but any trauma that anyone has dealt with throughout the last year of losing a loved one or anything, going through an illness. I
don't want to disregard any of that because obviously that's at the forefront with a lot of people.
Yeah. I'm just pointing out, we found out kind of firsthand how the effects of that isolation when you couldn't be with your loved ones at a hard time. So yeah, it's definitely compounded by the pandemic, having gone through this at this time.
So if you dig back in the archives, new or consistent listeners, and you go back to around November, there was a week that we took off. And since March of last year, we've been consistently putting out episodes. I think once or twice we put out an episode midweek, in addition to releasing an episode a week, with the exclusion of one episode in November. And you probably don't remember, maybe you do, we posted an Instagram story about it and saying, we're not going to record this weekend because COVID, or because she wasn't napping, or because pandemic, or...
I think it was because 2020.
Yeah, we just kept it vague. And that was the weekend we were supposed to record with the babes.
Yep.
And, we filled them in. But that was when you experienced the miscarriage.
Right.
And this was, how many weeks deep were you?
Only 5.
Okay. For some reason, I thought it was 9. Maybe because it sounds like 5 sometimes.
No, it was only 5.
9 to 5. I don't know. It sounds kind of rhymes.
Yeah.
9 to 5. That Dolly Parton.
Yep. Good old Dolly. Yeah.
So, I mean, we've had time. I don't, this is not minimizing anything. We've had time to at least, I don't know, absorb it a little bit. I can't speak for you or other women and say, you've had enough time to get over it. I don't want to make it sound like that. We've just had enough time to really assess.
Yeah, I think just process it enough to be able to talk about it.
Right.
I mean, I think in general, I'm the kind of person who likes to talk about things if I'm going through a hard time or whatever. I'm just the kind of person who likes to talk it out to try to process it.
Well, I do give you credit for this is a public platform.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean,
well, you went through it too, but I know it's different.
I mean, speaking as the husband and the father, it's more of, and this is not about me totally. It's mostly about you, but it's a passive experience more so.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going through it.
Right.
You're more actively going through it.
Sure, I'm physically going through it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so for me, as the father, it's, I don't know, secondhand.
Yeah, but I feel like, and I mean, I was going to ask you this. We might as well just jump into it now since we got here. But
this is not about me.
No, I know, but
right.
I feel like in your shoes, I feel like I would have felt a sense of just helplessness. And I felt that way too, obviously. Like there's nothing you can do about it. It's just something that happens and it's completely out of my control, even though it's happening in my own body. But for you, I feel like you probably, maybe that's how it feels to be on your side of it, is just that sense of helplessness.
Well, at that time we had a lot going on just in general. We were getting into the thick of the holidays.
Right, the election. COVID cases were soaring.
Yeah, but we had a handle on it, you and I, on what we should and should not have been doing.
Yeah, but it was still just like a scary time to hunker down sort of thing.
I stopped the other podcast. So I was sort of grieving my own personal, and it's not the same. I'm not drawing parallels here, but it was my baby that I was grieving ending.
Yeah,
in terms of my podcast.
You were passionate about that you were letting go of. Yeah.
And which obviously isn't nearly as important as what was going on. But when all that shit comes together, it's sort of fuck. Like
you just kind of put your head down and went on autopilot.
Well, I knew enough my shit was in the backseat. It's not, we're not going to talk about, we already did an episode about it, but at that time, I'm not saying to myself, hey, we really need to talk about this podcast that I stopped. And I know you just had a miscarriage, but we need to talk. That wouldn't make me an asshole.
Right. Well, I think you did what, all you could do in that situation of kind of picking up all the other things in terms of, caring for our toddler and just letting me take the time I needed.
again, not to minimize this, and I know this is just how I go about people that are experiencing things. If you need me, you would tell me, and I also offer myself to you. But my main mentality is when I don't understand or can't comprehend what someone's going through, just for lack of a better way to put it, just let them cry it out. Let them have their time to absorb it. It's kind of like, not the same. It's not a parallel, but if our child's going through something, it's kind of like, let her cry it out. She'll figure it out.
Right.
On a much smaller scale.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably not a bad comparison of like a toddler's brain and how they don't know how to process or express their emotions. Right. They're going through a tantrum. I feel like that's probably similar how you feel in that sort of experience when you're sort of going through something traumatic. It's like nothing is logical. Nothing is reasonable. You're just kind of feeling what you're feeling and you just have to kind of go through it.
Yeah. That's why with our kid, I'm always just let her go.
Yeah. Take a minute. And she says that now. She says, I just need a minute.
Yeah. So with you,
it's healthy.
My mentality was, I mean, again, I probably sound like such a shitty husband, but
what?
I was, because it makes me feel like, oh, go ahead, go figure it out.
No, but that's what I needed. I just needed time to just like.
Well, I was there for you if you needed me, and I did ask, like, what do you need from me? What can I do? What
I needed was exactly what you did, was to just do everything else so I didn't have to worry about it.
Right.
That's all. So I guess I wonder if we should just back up a little bit and give more of a timeline or just kind of describe the experience of, what happened.
We were thinking about having another child before the pandemic.
Right. So our daughter turned 2 in June, the middle of the year. Right.
We wanted to have another child by now.
Initially.
Ideally.
Pre-COVID.
Yes.
Yeah. We wanted her to be at least 2. Well, no, we wouldn't have had. Oh yeah, I guess around now. Right. So we thought we would.
We were trying to get we wanted to get pregnant. We were thinking ideally around January, February of 2020. And then we sort of put it off, or we maybe in the spring of 2020.
Yeah, it was around her birthday. I remember thinking I didn't want to get pregnant until she was 2.
Yeah, and then once the pandemic hit, we were like,
maybe not
a good idea.
Yeah, because I wasn't crazy about the idea of going in for regular, having to be in a hospital or a doctor's office if I didn't have to be.
And we didn't know the state of the hospitals as they were. They sounded. Obviously, that wing was
totally
probably
different.
Available.
Yeah.
But the way they made the hospital sound at that time was, we need every inch
all hands
of
on
this
deck.
hospital.
Yeah. So I think it was just, there was so much uncertainty in the, spring, even leading into the early summer of 2020, when we originally had wanted to start trying to get pregnant again. And so we put it off a few more months. And then
even as cases went down, we were thinking to ourselves, we want to wait until the fall and winter to see if there was going to be another surge.
Right.
And there was.
Right. But even by then, I think we were thinking, okay, well, by the time the baby would come, things would be looking up.
Sure.
2021 will be better, and we did a whole episode early on, I think, about our first, my experience with my first pregnancy and birth and all that.
Pregnancy to birth.
Yep. And we talked about, how easy it was for us to get pregnant the first time, and how textbook that pregnancy was in my delivery and everything. And so even though I know, and I've been told time and again, that every pregnancy and every experience is different, even for the same person, between children, it's hard not to go into it with the same expectations since that was the only experience I had ever had. So it did take a little bit longer for us to get pregnant than we did the first time around. We got pregnant on the first try with our daughter.
No, we didn't.
First or second. It did not
take
long.
Second try, because we tried on our honeymoon.
Okay. TMI.
No, yeah. I'm just saying.
Yeah, it was very quick. This time it took a little bit longer.
Everybody knows that you call the stork and the line's either busy or it's not.
Sure.
And on our honeymoon, it was busy.
I'm just saying, you're not the one tracking everything and looking at the calendar obsessively. So just trust me when I tell you it was faster the first time.
Out of stock of children.
Yeah, on back order.
Yeah.
So already I was Yeah, I think it was the stress of the pandemic, even though we decided, we don't want to wait until, we didn't want the kids to be too far apart in age. And in the back of my mind, even though I knew it was easy for us to get pregnant the first time and I had no reason to think it would be different this time around, I did have that nagging like, well, what if it does? What if it takes 6 months? What if it takes a year? And then they're like 3-4 years apart. And like, so we decided to just go for it, even though the pandemic was still happening.
This is around October, September.
Yeah. So we had that weird, like, so you still think that the pregnancy test was negative.
I have no idea what happened.
Yeah. So essentially what happened was in October, I took a pregnancy test and I saw the faintest of faint second line on the pregnancy test. And I remember always reading, if you see anything at all, no matter how faint it is, and even the directions on the test say this, it's positive. Like there has to be some of the hormone, the HCG, that causes the pregnancy test to turn positive. If there is nothing in your system, non-pregnant, then nothing will come up. If there is any trace of that hormone, you will get a very, very faint line. And so that's what I thought was happening. Because I was also testing super early because I was just anxious and I didn't wait until I missed my cycle or anything. So I figured, I'm just testing early. That's why it's so faint. I'll test again the next day and then in a few more days. So the next day I tested again and same thing, super faint, positive.
Well, we wanted the ones with words.
So these were the regular, just like 2-line pregnancy tests.
I remember
and then,
the first one. I couldn't even see the
I
second
know, but
line.
even I took pictures of it and I did end up sharing it with a couple of friends who also saw the line. So I feel like I wasn't totally crazy in seeing things. I feel like it was there. But what ended up happening was, so a few days later, I took a digital test, which said not pregnant. And I remember being so confused.
That's right.
And
you called me.
Yeah. And I was like, I guess I'm not pregnant. Like I was just expecting, it's early, so I'm getting faint positives. And in a few days, I'll confirm with a digital, which will be negative because the hormones will have increased by then. So that just left me totally confused. I was like, I just kind of told myself that I must have been seeing things and it was probably never a positive test, but I'll still never forget that positive.
Yeah, I remember I was putting down our child and I walked out of the room and on the kitchen table or counter was the test with a note that said we're pregnant or something.
It said because it was the night of the vice presidential debate and I was debating.
Oh, you got wine. That's right.
I wanted to have a glass of wine to get myself through that. But I wanted to test first because I thought I might be pregnant.
So you're like, oh, we're pregnant to have this wine. And I didn't look at the test. Because
you don't really know how to read it anyway.
Why would you lie to me? Right? I'm thinking, why would she? I have no reason to look at this test.
Yeah, okay.
And then I looked at it after we, were embracing each other and whatnot.
And you were confused.
Wait a minute. This only has one line. Is this what it means to be pregnant? And you said, no, there's 2. That's sure the fuck's not 2.
Look harder.
And that's no disrespect. I just, to this day,
I know.
I couldn't see the second line.
I know. So, anyway, I never even contacted my healthcare provider for that one. I just kind of chalked it up to maybe I'm seeing things. Maybe I didn't know. And then I read up on chemical pregnancies, and I guess.
So this wasn't diagnosed.
No, I never even called the midwives or anything
because there was doctor told you had a chemical pregnancy.
So I ended up. I'll get to that.
All right.
So I just kind of looked it up and I read about chemical pregnancies and. It's basically just a very, very early miscarriage. And apparently they are super common, but a lot of times people don't even know they have them because the loss happens. Like, I guess the egg is the egg is fertilized, but it never implants. And so that fertilization produces just enough HCG for a pregnancy test to pick it up, just enough to show a super faint line. And then you miscarry before most people would even test to find out if they're pregnant because it'll come around the time as your normal period would.
That's what I'm saying. So you just had a normal period.
Right. If I had never tested, because I was testing like 4 or 5 days before my missed period because I was anxious. And so if I had never tested, I would have never known or been confused or whatever.
Right.
So I just chalked it up to that. And it was still kind of just hard and confusing. But it wasn't the same as the next time, which was exactly a month later. And I remember it was the day I got my positive test was the day that they called the election for Biden. And I just remember
it was a Saturday.
Yep. So actually my positive tests were exactly a month apart. And so it was early October 7th and November 7th. So the day before, I had been texting with a friend of mine who has also been through this experience. And so we had been talking since the chemical pregnancy in October. And I was like, I was only like a day or two late. I didn't want to test too early again because I didn't want that to happen again. So I at least did wait until the day of my expected period. And but I just knew. I was like, I have symptoms. Like I know I'm pregnant. But I was terrified to test again and get positive and then have the same thing happen. But sure enough, I tested and we were just talking about like, just imagine if I get a positive test the same day that they call the election, like after all the work I had did, with the campaign and everything, like this would just be like too good to be true. And sure enough, I tested that Saturday morning and got a super strong, undeniable positive. I think it was even stronger than when we were pregnant with our first child. And yeah, I was just thrilled. I was like, okay, well, this is it now. That last month was this weird fluke thing. Like now we're really pregnant.
So just scientifically, was this technically your third pregnancy?
I don't know because there's no way. So medically, they don't count the first one, the one in October.
Quote unquote second. Well, our first one would have been
our first child, right? Was my first pregnancy. The October one, it doesn't. I don't count that as a pregnancy.
It's not measured. Okay.
Because I didn't report it to my doctors or my midwives, and they didn't do blood work to check the HC. So there's just no way to know. And I think for my own sanity, I just kind of had to brush that off.
No, I was just asking scientifically, is this considered your third? Okay.
Yes. So when I go to the doctor now, they ask me, they say, oh, this is your third pregnancy and you have one living child.
Yes. Which
is kind of a mind fuck the first time I heard it.
Right.
But
I was there.
Yeah. Well, that wasn't the first time I'd been asked that question.
Okay.
But yeah. So then it was a week. So I knew I was pregnant that whole week. Super excited. Due date was July. Told like our close, like your mom and like my best friend stuff, just like a couple people.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was only like 4 days later or something, I started spotting and I had stomach aches that whole week, but I just thought I'm like bloated or like whatever. Just thought I had weird digestive stuff happening because that's what happens in pregnancy too. And it never even crossed my mind that I could miscarry, after having experienced that weird fluke chemical pregnancy and having had a very healthy textbook pregnancy the first time around. I didn't really know that it could be any different. And so I totally brushed it off. And I texted one of my friends who had some spotting early in her first pregnancy, and everything turned out to be fine. So that's what I thought. So I waited several days, and it wasn't until that Saturday when I still was having some bleeding that I called the midwife, and she said, I'm going to have you come in, just go to the emergency room at the hospital. Just get things checked out just in case. So I did, and I had to go by myself because of COVID, and it was awful. It was like a 4 or 5 hours I was there, by myself, just not knowing what was going on.
Right.
In pain, having the cramping, which I found out later was contractions of the miscarriage happening. And, just they did all kinds of tests. I had to go through an ultrasound where they couldn't see anything because it was so early. And just the whole thing was really traumatic. And then at the end of all that, they told me that everything was inconclusive, that they couldn't tell what was happening, that I would just have to go for blood work in a couple of days to check the hormone level. And if it was my hormones at that time were low, but it wasn't low enough for them to be able to confirm the miscarriage was happening. So I guess they call that like a threatened miscarriage or whatever. So I was scheduled for blood work that following Monday to check the levels. But that night on Saturday, I started, I had the heavy bleeding and I knew it was happening. And it was awful. It was terrible. It was physically painful. It was emotionally just a complete, I was just a wreck. Like,
I feel like I'm saying this a lot, and I don't mean like again, this is just me being preemptive, not to minimize anything, but this is after 5 weeks.
Exactly.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
For those that have experienced it later.
Right. So
knowing
I think
what you experienced only at 5 weeks.
So the bottom line is, as far as with a loss of a pregnancy, a loss is a loss. And
I'm not saying it's not.
No, I know.
I'm saying
just
the experience.
Adding on to you. Right. Yeah. So a loss is a loss and grief is grief. But I think after having been through that, I also know I have friends who have been through losses later in their pregnancies. Right. Yeah. So a miscarriage is considered up to 20 weeks, or a loss up to 20 weeks. And after 20 weeks, it's considered a stillbirth. So I have friends who've experienced both. And I know if I had experienced it later, if I had a stillborn baby, like I just can't even begin to fathom the grief that would come with that, knowing what it was like just going through this loss at 5 weeks.
Right.
So I toggle between that all the time. Like, it doesn't minimize an early loss, but at the same time, I can only imagine how intense it is to go through it at a later time in the pregnancy.
Right. Yeah.
And physically, right? I feel like in some ways, I was fortunate that I didn't have to go in for a surgical procedure to assist with the miscarriage. Yeah. Like, it happened naturally. I was able to just stay home and work through it with, Tylenol and a heating pad.
And again, I don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm sure, I don't want to say easier or preferential or anything, but having it on a sort of molecular level is, I don't know if easier is the way to put it. I'm just saying like that's probably, what
do you mean?
I don't know what I'm talking about. Having it done at 5 weeks, having experienced it at 5 weeks when the embryo and whatnot is on a molecular level, so much so that they can't find it in an ultrasound.
Yeah. Well, that's why I didn't have to have a D&C.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I can only imagine if it was later.
Yeah.
And it's not on a molecular level anymore. It's probably
more physically painful and more. Yeah. Yeah, totally. So, so that was that experience. And that was the weekend that we were supposed to record. So I was like literally in the middle of going through this. I was not getting out of bed.
And I remember that night, our child was not going to sleep.
No. Yeah. Well, she was concerned about me. She knew something was wrong.
It was a cocktail of...
Yeah, it was just a clusterfuck.
The babes understood.
Yeah, yeah. So...
Were they the first persons we told?
Other than...
Our family?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
There you go, guys.
BFFs.
Yeah.
Well, and they were great. And everybody who knew was great and really supportive. And again, given the limitations of the pandemic... I think everybody did what they could, but I learned a lot going through this. I connected with a lot of people who have been through this, who I've known for years, and I had no idea that they had this experience until I opened up about my own. And it's just been quite the learning process. And I thought it was worth talking about because it's a very, very personal thing.
Right.
And people tend to go through it in isolation, and people don't announce pregnancies, until after the first trimester, because that's the, riskiest time or that's when most miscarriages happen.
And that's the rule of thumb.
Right. And that's become the standard of but in a way that the message that sends to me is, well, you don't want anybody to know about your pregnancy before your second trimester, because then if you lose the pregnancy, then you have to talk about your loss and you have to tell people that you had a miscarriage. And it's like, you don't want to have to do that. Whereas if it was like, you tell people you're pregnant and then you tell people that you're not, but I think it's also a personal decision if you want to tell people and let them into that trauma and that grief. So in some ways, I think it is easier to just tell people who are close to you. That way, if you do end up going through this, you have some support, but you don't have to announce it to the world that you lost your pregnancy if you don't want to share that with people.
I don't want to ruin your momentum here, but that is something, that whole topic is something we can do on the second half of the show in terms of why people wait and people's experiences. I just wanted to have you iron out yours if you have anything more to say about it.
Well, I mean, I think that was that was you're right. The last something that I learned was after I actually went through the miscarriage, I had to go back for blood work for like a month. Every week they have to check your hormones to make sure they go back to zero.
Yep.
So technically, the thing that I found messed with me so much that I never knew that this happened, you're hormonally still pregnant for weeks.
Well, your body is responding to it as if you were
still
pregnant.
have the pregnancy hormone in your body
Yeah.
for weeks potentially after you miscarry, depending on how late you were in the pregnancy too. So since I was so early, I think, my hormone levels were low from the beginning. So it didn't even take that long. I feel like the 3 or 4 weeks that it took for me is probably not even as long as it takes for someone who's, further along in their pregnancy when it happens. So, that just sucked. Like I had to go back to the lab, the same lab every week where there were always pregnant women because it's a lab that is an OBGYN lab. And that really was just added to the trauma of the experience. Sure. But I understand that it's necessary. So, yeah. And then we decided we were going to take a break from trying because that was a doozy, and I wanted to give myself time.
Was going on.
Yeah, there was so much going on. We were going into the holidays. We were like, let's just relax and enjoy the holidays as much as we can, given the fact that we couldn't be with our family and friends, and give ourselves time to just heal, physically and emotionally, and just like start fresh in the new year. And then we got pregnant around the holidays.
Well, Scorpion Bowls.
Yeah. Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve,
Listen, you have to have at least 3 Scorpion Bowls to have sex with this guy.
Oh God, that's not the rule. That's not what I thought you were gonna say. I thought you were gonna say on Christmas Eve or on New Year's Eve.
With me, that's what it takes.
Yeah. So, we stopped trying and we ended up getting pregnant. Very shortly, just like a month later. I think it was...
All the women listening are like, yeah, no, I can. Maybe even more than 3.
Yeah, I don't even know. I don't know how to count the Scorpion Bowls that we drank this year because we didn't drink them out of a Scorpion Bowl. Like I drank it out of a normal glass.
We made them.
Yeah, obviously. We did our Chinese takeout and we tried to emulate our normal experience, but... I don't know how many I had because it was just out of a normal glass.
A lot.
And not an actual bowl.
A lot. And I realized how much sugar.
Oh my God, I know. With the juice and the grenadine and all that. I know. Yeah.
I think that's my most recent hangover.
I know. It's easy to get hungover on
Christmas
that though
Day.
because of the sugar. So.
All right. I'm not rushing you. I'm just asking
you're
if there's
right.
anything else that you want to say about your experience.
I mean, that was pretty much the end of the miscarriage, like the actual miscarriage experience itself.
Okay. Obviously, there are carryovers that we'll talk about and how
it's affected this pregnancy.
Right now. But let's take a break here.
Yep.
Good job.
Thanks.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
I know it's hard. It's hard to talk about something very personal.
I'm not trying to be patronizing here. I'm legit.
Thank you.
Yeah. We'll be right back.
This is Symbol A.
So I feel like that's a pretty common thing that you hear. We stopped trying and then we got pregnant.
So that's all right. Okay. Yes, that's true. And I don't know if that is something that biologically, when your body is more relaxed and not trying, I don't know. I feel like, I don't know what obviously to me it's so formulaic. Oh, sperm and egg, haha, now you got a baby. But I don't know if there are maybe intangibles is the wrong word, but the stress of it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's kind of like the wives' tale, I think, but I mean, it's not, I think there is some science behind it that obviously stress affects your physical body. I mean, while you're trying to conceive and during pregnancy, I mean, right. Stress is just, too much stress is not good. So, I mean, I think there might be something to it, but I don't think anybody really knows. Like, nobody can really put their finger on it. But
right. It's
I also
not
think
measurable.
it's probably just some coincidence too
Sure.
that people say that. I'm sure there are just as many, if not more, people who are trying and get pregnant than people not trying and
Right,
get pregnant. But like people just kind of say that. But for us, that was kind of the case. So, so this is one of the things I learned having gone through this experience is that actually saying that, oh, we weren't even trying to someone else, like, especially if you don't know if that person has been trying for a long time, maybe that person is like suffering through infertility. And that can be something that is really, painful for someone else to hear who has been trying really hard.
Yeah.
And so that was something that I learned going through this experience and connecting with, moms and parents in this community. And, I mean, I feel like I probably should stop saying that. I'm thinking that now as I just said it on the podcast.
I don't even know what that means. To me, that sounds so strange coming from a dude when someone says, oh, we weren't even trying. And if someone said that to me, oh, we weren't even trying and we got pregnant, I'd say, did you pull out?
Okay, so like there are some people I know who were on birth control and got pregnant.
Okay, that makes
for
sense.
Us, it was more of like, so we weren't trying really hard not to get pregnant.
That's what I'm saying.
But we weren't trying like I wasn't checking my calendar and like making
I
sure
have one job.
I know you show up when I tell you it's time, but like this was we were purposefully, or I thought we were avoiding the fertile window, like the few days, week within the month that you're supposed to be able to get pregnant, but those things aren't exact. It's not an exact science. My cycle was still a little bit messed up from the miscarriage, I think. And so the calculations were wrong. And I think it was only off by like a day or two, but it was enough.
Is it hormonally because of the miscarriage?
It could be. I mean, I had a cycle in between, which is supposed to sort of regulate you.
Are you more fertile after a miscarriage?
I've heard that. I don't know how much truth or science there is behind that, but I have heard that.
So maybe the window is wider, or it's open quicker,
or it could have opened earlier than I thought it did. And so it's not a perfect science, but my point is we weren't purposefully trying to have sex during the fertile window. Like that, to me, that's like when you're trying to have a baby. You
purposely trying to have sex with me is, you gotta be 3 scorpion bowls deep. Otherwise you're tired. Get off of me.
Oh my God, stop. But that beard.
Don't touch me.
Okay, so.
Go to your friends' wives' OnlyFans.
So let's talk about, oh my God. So that's one of the things I learned. Like I've been enlightened to some of the things, and people have very good intentions. I'm not saying that, we need to like constantly walk on eggshells about what we say to people and like overthink it entirely. But I think it just helps to have in the back of your mind, like a better understanding of what the person on the receiving end of what you're saying might be going through and how what you're saying might affect them. Like just to have that understanding and have it on your radar, I think is helpful.
I think Sarah mentioned that on the show.
Yes.
That,
about
they were on a couple months back.
Yep. About just people asking when you're going to have kids.
Right.
That's a huge one. Yes, totally. When you're going to have kids, because the person you're talking to, maybe they've been trying for a year and now they're going to start IVF or something, or maybe they've had several miscarriages. And, and the other one is how many kids do you have is something that for someone who's gone through, I know that that's like a total normal, like just making conversation question. But at the same time, for someone who's gone through a loss or who has gone through several losses, it's a complicated question. Like, especially if you had a very late pregnancy loss or if you've had a stillbirth, like that person probably considers themselves a parent to the children that they've lost.
So a common thing after reading up on this, after it happened, and again, just articles and Reddit is such a fantastic resource. Dad it or pre-dad it, because there are, it's a good community of dads or soon to be dads that may have experienced this. Something that I found common and we didn't do this. I didn't want to suggest this to you, but we can talk about it. Naming the child, so you're ascribing connection to it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people do that.
Yeah.
Especially with stillborns
Sure.
later in the process, because it's closer to the end of the or what would have been the end of the process naturally.
Yeah, and in that scenario, the mother gives birth, and
so
you
I guess,
usually meet the child, and
right in that case, you just saying how many kids do you have?
Sure,
they are more connected to you as kids you had.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's a name ascribed to them.
And
there's a sort of a in memoriam kind of thing.
Right. Right. It just kind of illuminated to me, like, or if you see a pregnant woman, you say, oh, is this your first?
Right.
Maybe she's had a loss before that, or so it's not her first pregnancy, but maybe it's going to be her first child. Maybe it's going to be her first chance at having a living child.
Sure.
Like, you just don't know. And it's, I had always, I knew about miscarriage, knew it was a thing, had no idea how common it was when I went with my first pregnancy. Now I'm very familiar with the statistics around it. It's 1 in 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage. So that's a high number. And that's only the ones that, we know about, like, because there are so many early miscarriage chemical pregnancies that happen before women even know they're pregnant. So biologically, the biologist in me could totally understand and rationalize and, understand the logic of the fact that this is just something that happens in normal biology. Like, it's part of life. Right. Not all pregnancies are viable. There's a chromosomal, most of them are due to chromosomal abnormalities. It's nothing that I did. It's not because
That's the first thing I said to you.
Yeah, it's not because I went for that long hike. Like, the day that I started bleeding, I had gone for this long hike with our toddler, and I had been carrying her around, and I thought maybe I overdid it. I'd had a glass of wine before I knew I was pregnant, and I'm like, oh, maybe that was like,
but
I was drinking coffee.
Yeah.
Like, I know. And there's nothing like that is the cause.
So real quick, let me interject. Is your miscarriage the earliest detectable time? When is it? You know how you said 1 in every 4, and that's only the ones that the doctors can measure, and they don't count When is it early enough to measure?
Probably around 4 or 5 weeks.
Okay.
I mean, that's when you can get a positive at-home pregnancy test.
Okay.
Because we had been, because I had a pregnancy before, like, I knew I was pregnant from my symptoms, and I knew there was a chance I could have been, even though we weren't trying at the time. And so I tested, but I think if there's a person who doesn't even have it on their mind, they're not trying at all to get pregnant, and they kind of accidentally get pregnant, they might not test as early as I did. And they might just think that they had a really heavy period or something.
I got you. Right.
So, like, yeah, it depends on the person. But, so we put up an Instagram poll. I was curious because like I said, after I went through this and started talking about it more openly, I found out people I'd known forever who I never knew went through this. And I, started thinking
about... Well, this wasn't a result of the poll.
No. Sorry. What prompted me to put up the poll was the fact that I had come to this realization. Right. And I was curious to see how many other people also knew someone who had been through this or had been through it themselves. And I was not surprised that the result was 100%
right.
of people who saw that poll had either been through this experience or knew someone who had. So, I mean, to me, that makes sense with the statistics that if you haven't been through it or your partner hasn't been through it, you definitely know someone who has, even if you don't know
it. Right.
Right. So it just kind of taught me to try to be a little bit more thoughtful in how I talk about this with people, not make assumptions, not assume that everybody has had an experience like I did with my first pregnancy that was so easy and seamless and textbook, and understand that it's a very, very complicated thing and people go through a lot of different experiences.
I want to run it back to when you were talking about not announcing in the first trimester, because again, I'm not who am I? But I think I know what you're trying to say, and the message that is being set out and saying, basically, and I'm paraphrasing, 1 in every 4 women that are pregnant, it will result in a miscarriage. That's the statistic.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more common than you think. And not that you want to have this be casual. I don't think there's ever a time where you'd be like, yeah, I had a miscarriage, fuck it.
Right.
It's not something that I think is appropriate to just be, unless you want it to. I mean, I feel like that's up to the individual.
Of course, yeah. Some people, I think, feel guilty if they don't feel grief, because some people don't grieve it.
But at the same time, I do understand. I'm not saying you should feel embarrassed, or anybody should feel embarrassed. You shouldn't. But I understand someone's reluctancy to make their pregnancy public within the first trimester, thinking about the risk of the miscarriage, because it is quite high, as you said, in the first trimester.
Right.
Scientifically. I can understand why someone would not want to go through announcing it to pretty much everybody, their boss, their family, their friends, and then not because they're ashamed of themselves, but it's saying, now I have to be reminded of it every single time I have to tell someone.
To your grief by having to tell it.
Yeah, if you forget to tell someone, and that person's like, oh, how are you doing? How's the pregnancy? Oh, fuck. I have to go through this again.
No, totally. That's why I still think it's totally reasonable for people to want to wait if they make that choice. I just think it's the narrative and the message that it sends, that's sort of like the unwritten rule. That it's like,
I don't think it's a bad rule, though. I don't think it's harmful, is what I'm saying.
No, but I think in the bigger picture, I think it just puts such a stigma on miscarriage that if you go through this, you're better off going through it alone. It's kind of like the narrative that we've built around it, and because this is sort of the unwritten rule, kind of pigeonholes you into that, even if that's not how you would choose to do it. Like, even if you want to announce sooner, you're kind of discouraged from doing that for this reason.
I get that. I'm just saying, for the individual, I can understand why that individual would make a personal choice to say, I know, I can only go by experience, right? So every time we were pregnant, we told our close family and friends first, maybe a handful of people. So we knew who to tell.
Yeah, no, I know. I completely understand. And I agree with you that it's a protective thing for some people. And it would lessen their grief than if they had to go and, like, if, say, you announced it on social media.
That's what I'm saying.
And then you had to go announce on social media that you had a loss, even if you weren't ready for that and you didn't want to go through that. But I think, I don't know. I just feel like,
which again is kind of a weird thing. I'm speaking from a dude. Announcing on social media that you had a miscarriage. And again, I don't know if this is something that you're saying should be normalized. And of course, if the individual wants to do that, that's all you, more power to you. It's just, that's such an odd thing, I feel, to just put out there like that.
Yeah,
as an open social thing for everyone. Right.
I know, but we put
it does seem sort of private, no?
I mean,
I don't know. I'm a guy. I'm just asking.
It doesn't matter that you're a guy.
I don't know what it feels like to have a miscarriage. So I don't know if this is something that you're encouraging people to be more open about it to the point where they post about it on social media in a public forum.
No, I said everybody should make their own personal decision and not be dissuaded from the narrative that we've been taught, that it's like this rule that you do not announce until you're after your first trimester. Like, if you feel like, but the other caveat to that is you don't know how you're going to feel if it does happen to you, and you don't know. So it's just, my point is that it's just a personal choice, and everybody should feel free to announce their pregnancy when they feel ready.
Yeah.
And they shouldn't be judged for it. Like, I still feel like I do that. Like, if I see someone announce a pregnancy and I like see the due date and I do a quick calculation in my head and I'm like, oh man, they're only like, 8 weeks along. It's kind of early. Wow.
But it is.
Like,
you're assessing the risk, especially as a scientist.
Oh, I know, but it's not. My point is, it's none of my business.
Oh, no. I'm not saying they did something wrong.
No, I'm saying that rule is so ingrained in my head that I in my subconscious, I calculate it and like judge other people for when they announce their pregnancies, because I've been told so many times you shouldn't announce pregnancy till the second trimester. And that's like the rule.
I guess because of this rule, and I've been so, as you said, ingrained, because when we got pregnant the first time, it was, okay, I think you were the one, we don't tell anybody.
Yeah, because that's what I was told you, that like, that's just what you do.
I had no fucking idea. I was, okay, I'm just
and
following
I didn't think that miscarriage
lead.
was really a thing that was going to happen to me. Like, it seemed so foreign.
No.
And like,
I get that.
So that's what I'm saying is like, it's such a foreign concept if it's never happened to you, even though it is so incredibly common, that when it does happen, you feel so isolated because you don't know. Like I said, I didn't know of all these friends that I had who had been through this, who ended up being an incredible source of support for me. And I wouldn't have known if I hadn't shared my experience and then they reached out and said, hey, I've been through this too.
Right. I guess what I'm saying to you is, now that we know how common it is, doesn't that, and I'm just putting the question out there, doesn't that give you more incentive to say, let's hold off and see what happens in the first trimester because it's so common? There's a 25% chance.
Yeah, I know. I think you're missing my point. I'm saying that because we do that and people don't talk about it, nobody knows how many other people they know that have gone through it, and they end up going through it alone if it does happen.
If someone experiences the miscarriage, they should have the support.
But it's impossible to do that if nobody talks about miscarriage, because no one announces pregnancies before the second trimester.
I think it's two different things. I think the conversation about miscarriages and the openness and the I guess the freedom, even though technically everyone has the freedom to do it, to discuss it openly, should be embraced. But my point is I think we're pinpointing two different things. I don't necessarily see anything wrong with the quote unquote rule of not announcing in the first trimester because of how common it is.
I'm saying it shouldn't be a rule. It should just be, you go into it with eyes wide open, understand how common miscarriage is, and make your decision based on that.
Sure.
I just don't think it should be like to me, I never even considered announcing any earlier than after the first trimester, because I didn't think I had a choice. Like, that's just what you do. You don't tell people until your second trimester.
It had nothing to do with miscarriage.
Oh, I didn't understand. I didn't really even understand the reason. Like,
right, but now that you know, is that something you're someone?
No, I told way more people during this pregnancy before this. I mean,
all right.
I'm technically not even in the second trimester yet right now. I have another week or so to go, but yeah, I mean,
that's interesting to me, because speaking from how I think I would be, I would probably, because of the experience, I feel like I would say, I'm not saying anything to anyone.
No, I was like, well, I didn't publicly announce it, obviously, until now, but I'm saying I did tell more people than I told with the first pregnancy, because I knew I was going to, and I told people who had expressed support to me during
sort of like
the
a
first
preemptive
miscarriage,
thing,
like
just in case.
Yeah. And also because, so back to the timing of this episode was convenient in a way that it's like right when I'm on the horizon of the second trimester, and we felt it was about the right time to announce. And this month of March is Pregnancy After Loss Awareness Month. So that's a whole nother conversation, like what it's like to go through pregnancy after you've experienced a loss. And for me, especially, it's so soon after the loss. It's still pretty fresh, and I don't even know if I fully processed or grieved what happened. It's the level of anxiety that I've experienced this pregnancy, like, is hard to describe. And that's why I needed that support from people who understood what it was like. And
I don't discourage the support. I think...
No, I know, but what I'm trying to point out to you is that the support can't happen if people don't know that other people are going through the same experience.
Right.
So, and how you get that, how you have those conversations is completely up to you.
Of course,
I'm just saying, this larger narrative of miscarriage being this like stigmatized thing that nobody wants to talk about. It's almost like if you talk about it, you think you're going to jinx it. Like, especially for first time, like for during your first pregnancy. And I can also understand, like, no one wants to tell a newly pregnant person especially if it's their first pregnancy. Like, you don't want
You
to
have
come
a
at them with like,
25% chance.
hey,
so-
by the way, I had a miscarriage, so just so you know, if anything happens, you can come talk to me.
Right,
Like,
right.
no one wants to put that anxiety on a newly pregnant mom either. So I can understand why it's like sort of hush hush to protect people and not cause undue anxiety. But at the same time, it then, if and when things do happen to people, they don't have a support
So
system.
they're relying on other people to
Share their
hopefully-
experiences. Yes. After and I will say, I did have, I said I didn't realize there were some people I knew for a long time who had been through this until I shared my experience. But on the other hand, there were some people I knew who had experience because they shared their loss when it happened. And I knew this is a person I can go to because now I've had the same experience. And
Right.
they were very open, and they, encouraged at the time, if you're going through something similar, if you ever need support or someone to talk to, I'm here. And that was like a lifesaver to have those people
I feel
available
you.
to me.
I just know how I am with mundane shit. Mm-hmm. And if I feel something good is going to happen, I don't tell a soul.
Yeah, you don't want to jinx it.
A soul. And, with this pregnancy, I told my best friend, and I think that was it. And it's not because of the miscarriage. It was, I can't say it had nothing to do with it, but it wasn't because I was ashamed of the miscarriage or ashamed of you or ashamed of having to have that conversation again should it happen.
Mm-hmm.
It was more of this is what makes me comfortable, and it's my own superstition of, I do this again with mundane shit, so I just don't want to tell a lot of people because I just like to keep that private, that surprise factor, I guess, private. And the only person I would talk to about it besides you, if it were to happen again, is the only person I already told.
Well, I guess for me it was because we had told so few people during the pregnancy that we miscarried. There were other people in my life who I wanted to know that we had been through that, or I was going through that, who didn't know I was ever pregnant in the first place. So I still had to recount it and tell them what happened.
Right.
But it was like I had to go all the way back to the beginning, be like, hey, so don't get too excited. I was pregnant.
Yeah.
Now I'm not. And so I still sort of had to go through that reliving process, even though I hadn't told people.
Yeah, my approach to that was, it is not my place to talk about your experience, right? So that's how I approached it. And to your credit, you did say you had a miscarriage too, Adam, but it never felt that way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not anything you did or didn't do. It's just, obviously, I think this is maybe, I don't know, does this make me a psychopath? Like, it's going to affect the woman more than it would the man,
I think,
obviously.
And I do think, there's this old saying too that someone told me when we had our daughter that, women become mothers when the second they find out they're pregnant.
Yeah.
And moms become moms
Yeah,
when they first
I
find
feel
out they're
you.
pregnant. Dads become dads
When the baby's born.
Yeah, at the time of the birth.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of truth. Not to say that men don't love their unborn children.
No, of course, but it's not
You
actualized.
don't have the opportunity for that physical connection until you can hold the baby
But
in your arms.
You're bearing that child.
Right. The mother is physically connected to the child from day one.
Yeah.
And so, and I think I described it to you this way, that like, to me, I could not process the idea that I was pregnant and then I wasn't, and I didn't have a baby.
Right.
Like, I had never had that experience before.
Well, isn't that similar to postpartum?
Yeah, that's another thing that, for me, right, there was that gradual...
I'm no longer pregnant.
Yeah, and it's the hormone drop that can mess with you postpartum. And throughout, if you're nursing, then there's the hormonal stuff too with that. But yeah, I think that's another thing that I learned that I never ever crossed my mind, is that women who go through a miscarriage or have a stillbirth, are still postpartum after
Right.
they experience their loss. I mean, in obviously in varying levels of, intensity across the spectrum, but yeah, you have this hormonal shift. You go from being pregnant to not being pregnant, and it's just a mind fuck to not be pregnant and also not have a child anymore.
Obviously, it's a little different because when you, and I'm stating the obvious here, when you give birth to the child, just the quote unquote normal, it's, even though it's not normal, you know what I'm trying to say. It is normal to experience it, but the shift in hormonal imbalance is obviously a hormonal imbalance is not equilibrium.
Mm-hmm.
So, experiencing that level of hormonal imbalance after you give birth to a child that's healthy and, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you're no longer pregnant, but the quote unquote fruit of labor is right in front of you, right?
Right.
Your child is there.
Right. And with the miscarriage, or, for me, it's like, obviously it wasn't the same as going through labor and childbirth, but like I still went through a physical thing, right?
Of
like
course,
I went through being pregnant. I only knew I was pregnant for about a week, but still I had symptoms. I was nauseous. I, had all the early pregnancy symptoms. And then I went through the miscarriage and the physical pain that came with that. And then there was nothing.
Yeah. And that's a mind fuck.
Yeah.
I can imagine. All right. We're a little over an hour. Yeah. I'm not cutting you off.
I mean, there's a lot to say on this topic. I mean, everybody can just speak from their own experience. I don't mean to speak for anybody else who's been through this. This is just my experience and some of the things that I've learned from talking to other people who have been through this. But every experience is unique. And I also think, it's not something that should take away from the excitement of being pregnant, finding out you're pregnant.
Yeah.
It's
and again, I don't want that to be lost on the episode.
Right. So it was we felt a little bit like unsure of this is how we want to announce our pregnancy, because we are very happy and very excited. Of course, in the back of I've been saying getting to the second trimester is a huge milestone for me because I experienced an early loss. But like I said, I have known people who have experienced losses later in their pregnancy, and I know that it happens. I know the risks get lesser and lesser through the farther along the pregnancy is, but my anxiety is not going anywhere until the baby is born. And I've found really the therapy is great. If you've been through this, find yourself a therapist who specializes in this, because it's a unique type of grief and a unique type of anxiety to be pregnant after a loss.
Which those sessions will probably sooner than you think be in person.
Yeah, that will be nice. Yeah, that's true.
Plus experiencing that in the shittiest season of the year where there's no semblance of vitamin D.
Oh, it was so depressing. I know.
So
I couldn't get
now-
out and get fresh air.
yeah.
It was just
With the spring here and
things are looking up.
COVID cases going down, vaccinations, which you're eligible in the second phase for Rhode Island, so before me, that's all I care about. If you choose and feel comfortable to get it as a pregnant person, not because of fears of the vaccine being Bill Gates 5G.
But I think there's pretty consistent guidance from all of the entities that matter that it's safe for pregnant women.
I'm not saying it's unsafe. I'm saying it's obviously a conversation you have to have
of course, with your own doctor. Yep.
Not that there's anything wrong with the vaccine. It's not. It's not going to fuck with your DNA.
Most likely, I'm going to be like first in line next week.
All right. Well, look, we are excited about our second child being born. Or we're being pregnant right now. I would like it to be a boy.
You're one of each?
I just would like one of each.
Yeah.
But the world does not need another me. So a girl would be beneficial in that regard, and it's cheaper for us.
Yeah, we've got all the
clothes, we have all the toys.
Yeah, and they'll be like BFFs.
And we don't have to change the name of the podcast. We don't have to rebrand. But if we have a boy, we could still be while she's napping. But Dad, she doesn't even shut the fuck up, son.
Yeah,
shut up.
While she's napping and while he's probably not.
Yeah. Dad, how come you didn't include me in the pot? Shut up. Because you were number 2. No.
Yeah. But yeah, so far, everything with this pregnancy is going great, regardless of the fact that I've had crazy anxiety. And I always have in the back of my mind that something bad is going to happen. But I also realize that is a completely normal neurological response to what,
But
to
still,
what we've been
trust your
through. But
instinct.
yes, try to trust your instincts. And yeah, don't be ashamed to lean on your support system and talk about it if you want to. And it's something that's more common than you think. And the more people you talk to, the more people you'll realize can relate. I think.
Sure.
Yeah.
For sure. All right. Well, that being said, good job.
Thanks.
What are we doing next week? Are we doing cancel culture part 2?
Or is it the podcast anniversary next week?
No, it's the following week.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. We have it outlined. I don't have it in front of me.
Okay. Well, the Bachelor season ending is next week, so
That's
I
right.
didn't know
And they just announced that Chris Harrison is not the host next season.
Oh, well,
Yep.
so we should.
Yeah, we should revisit that.
All right.
You just want to brag because you're going to end up winning.
I don't know what you're talking about. It's just my thing. Hey, next week we're gonna have donuts, so we can talk about those next week too. But anyways, that being said, if you would like to share your experience, all the women out there that may have gone through a miscarriage, if you feel comfortable, I think Cindy is a valuable asset in that regard. If you would like to message her directly, there are ways you can find that out on the Instagram page. I don't really feel comfortable unless you want to putting your personal handle up on the podcast right now.
That's okay. You can always email us too.
Well, yeah,
That's direct
I
and
won't,
anonymous.
I won't read the emails.
I'll check the emails.
Yeah, that's fine. That's what I was trying to get at.
Yes.
I won't have a hand in this because I'm stupid.
Oh my God.
Anyways.
So yeah, our email, I don't think I mentioned it in the beginning, is whileshesnapping@gmail.com.
Right. If you want to talk about it, you can. We encourage it. We welcome it. Cindy welcomes it. I will have nothing to do with it. Don't worry. That being said, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard, it's been a long time since we've done anything parent related.
Yeah.
And that's what this show started off as. And now it's, sort of going all over the place, which I like. I think
Me
it's
too.
great.
Keeps it fresh.
But decided to bring it back because, we're going to be doubly parents.
Yep.
Ruin another person's life. Anyways, until next week, we appreciate you listening. Subscribe, tell your friends about us, and
yeah, thanks for listening. This is a hard topic, but if
Yeah.
you stuck through it, thank you.
Take care.